all. I'm really sorry for this not so short delay now.
No problem.
Okay, thanks. I think this is the biggest panel ever. I suppose we've never seen a bigger panel than this. But don't worry, they're going to be very efficient, 3 to 4 hours and we'll be done, okay? So just before the bedtime, we'll leave the premise, okay? My duty for tonight is to introduce you with the two first guests. Then we'll take over for everybody else at the table, and it's a long list. And then we'll mix together and moderate this session. Of course, we are planning for Q&As, and I'm certain that you'll have lots of questions that you would like to ask to our panelists. So for the first two speakers, we'll have Luka Korlaja, the Deputy Mayor of Zagreb. He's here with us tonight. And also the Mayor of City of Grenoble, Eric Poyet. Eric is online, and thank you, Eric, for joining us via Zoom. So we're planning to have a couple of minutes for each of the presenters, and then all the other presenters will also have a couple of minutes, and then we'll slowly go. When I say a couple of minutes, it's the minutes that you need, of course, but we'll keep track of time, don't worry. I just have maybe 2 or 3 talking points which you can take into consideration, or you can completely disregard. I'm okay with that. I won't be hurt. I wanted to read a definition which I usually use in my lectures concerning what is a degrowth, and I try to explain various kinds of audiences what is a degrowth. Then I use the definition from the research group of degrowth, which says that it is a voluntary transition towards a just, participatory, and ecologically sustainable society. The objectives of degrowth are to meet basic human needs and ensure a high quality of life, while reducing the ecological impact of the global economy to a sustainable level, equitably distributed between nations. Very vague, very precise, very wide, very general. It's a definition that we can use, maybe can provoke some of the speakers for tonight. Concerning cities and degrowth, when you look a little bit at the literature on degrowth, there is things concerning degrowth and municipalism, degrowth and new municipalism. There are some works on degrowth in the cities, but there isn't such a big bulk of work concerning the life in the cities and cities as such. Cities as one of the most complex systems of social communities. We know now that we have more people living in the cities in the world than none living in the cities, and that's around from, I think, 2013 or 14 that we have decreased the number of people living in the cities. We know that cities are responsible for the biggest share of greenhouse gas emissions. So there is a huge responsibility of changing people living in the cities and how cities are organized. I know now a little bit from the experience of Zagreb. Zagreb isn't the biggest city in the world. It's rather decent. It's moderate, a little bit less than 1 million people. But it's extremely complex. It's complex and perplexed with various kinds of legal things, various interests. It's very difficult it's very, very difficult to imagine the change that we want to have in a city like this. And this is definitely not the biggest city in the world. So for the beginning, I would like Luka prepared the presentation. He was worried that he was going to be the only presenter with the presentation. And I think that's fine to have a presentation. I like people with presentation. So please warm Luka with an applause and his presentation. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. I'm super excited to join you, to feel this atmosphere, and thank Branko and Vedran for the warm welcome. And also, I'm very privileged to be within this group of experts who will speak tonight. Since I come from Zagreb, I'm the Deputy Mayor of Zagreb, and I used to teach at the School of Architecture in Zagreb, and I was a practitioner of. I thought it would be appropriate for me to show you a couple of slides that deal with Zagreb specifically, and give a few notes on degrowth topic regarding Zagreb. As Branko nicely put, Zagreb is, well, complex city. And this is a figure ground map of Zagreb. And I will just give you a couple of basic information about Zagreb, some basic facts and figures that will maybe make it more readable, so to say, and easier for you to orientate within the city. So it was founded in 1094, and this is its medieval core. And from north to south, some spatial and time sectors are aligned. Medieval core, lower town that dates from 19th century, and then came the railroad. The railway was actually the trigger of its growth, of its economic development. And right after the tracing of the railway, the Strnje area started to develop. It's a vast area that was primarily inhabited with workers that immigrated to Zagreb throughout the 20th century in order to find a job in a newly founded factories along the railway. And then we have this Novi Zagreb or New Zagreb area where we are now in this spot here called Zagreb Fair. We could call it a stretched city because due to the fact that the railway goes from east to west and it has its gravitational zones on the east and west, and it's clenched somehow between the mountain Medvednica and River Sava. It primarily develops in this east-west direction, and its dimension in this east-west direction is today more than 20 kilometers. So it's more than 20 kilometers long in this direction. And city planners, urban planners throughout the 20th century tried to make it more compact. They tried to make it to prevent it from stretching endlessly in this east-west direction by introducing some parallel longitudinal roads or lines of transport, and at the same time some transversal ones, right? So this arrow denotes the will to stress this north-south direction. And this guy here, who used to be a mayor from 1952 to 1962, Vyacheslav Holjac, the most famous mayor of Zagreb, introduced or initiated this crossing in this north-south direction, crossing of the river and occupying this area where we are now. Zagreb Fair, actually, this very spot that we are now in was the first thing that happened on the southern bank of the River Sava, and then came the residential neighborhoods, each of which has approximately 10,000 inhabitants. So it's a good measure. It's a human scale, let's say, and it relates very good, I would say, to what we today call a 15-minute city. It's an agenda introduced by, you all know, Anne Hidalgo, the mayor of Paris, and actually it's a strategy that promotes that each and every part of the city has everything needed within the 15-minute walk range. And this is what we are trying to achieve today in Zagreb. So building upon this intention to make the city more compact in order to prevent it from stretching endlessly, we are trying to densify it and to introduce this 15-minute city in Zagreb. This map here shows the master plan of Zagreb, and the red dots or the red zones denote public use. So we try to scatter public use throughout the city in order to, enrich each and every neighborhood with everything needed for this 15-minute city concept. This is a master plan debate that took place in the Society of Architects, and this is the master plan debate that took place on the level of neighborhood councils. This here on the right is Branko, who seems quite doubtful about the suggestions. But nevertheless, we are very keen on this bottom-up approach. So top-down and bottom-up are both, I would say, nourished by this government, and I think that the perplexing of the two gives the best result. Of course, there is a theoretical backdrop to all of this, and just one of the books, one of the authors that is, who is very important to me, Jan Gehl, a famous Danish urban planner and teacher, wrote a number of books on this topic, planning of contemporary cities. This is one of them that I advise you to read. So coming back to this diagrammatical image, I would like to focus on this area, Trnje. It's a vast neighborhood that was, as I said in the beginning, inhabited mostly by the workers who found job in the newly founded factories along the railway, and it was more or less unregulated, built in an irregular manner. And this is a vast spatial potential, a vast physical potential of contemporary Zagreb. This is just one of the aerial images of this area called Gredelj. It used to be a train factory along the railway. And of course, there is a vision how to reuse, how to recycle this area and give it a new meaning, give it a new life. Another one and another one that is derelict now, but we are now in the final phase of planning, and we are very soon going to do something about it in a literal way. One of the things that have to be mentioned is the earthquake that took place in 2020, in the March of 2020. It shook us well. It destroyed large chunks of the city, but so it was a great misfortune. But at the same time, it was a trigger for, as it's written here, new beginning for old houses. And so primarily, so the city takes care of the public buildings. This is one of the school buildings that was refurbished and reopened lately, and really got a new life, and it was heavily damaged in the earthquake. Images during the construction and after the school was finished, the corridors before and after, and another school building and another one. So, as I said, earthquake was a great misfortune, but at the same time, it was a trigger for the new beginning. In order to make all this possible, in order to give new blood to this vast area of Trnje and more, we have to improve public transportation, of course. This is the drone footage of the tram. Place where they go to sleep. Yes. New buses. And the short video that shows what we do in terms of promoting public transportation, development of pedestrian zones and bicycle routes, bicycle tracks. Last year we were the finalist of this European Mobility Week, along with Braga from Portugal and Sofia from Bulgaria, and Braga was the winner. But yeah, we are very proud to be shortlisted.
And the last thing that I'm going to address tonight is housing. Housing is the most important topic of all, affordability of housing. This city government does everything it can in order to promote affordability of housing. I'm going to show you just two slides, two images that show the discrepancy between the offer or the supply of long-term lease apartments in Zagreb and the short-term lease ones, Airbnbs and such. So there are 5 times more short-term lease apartments in Zagreb, which makes affordability of housing very, very low. And this government has a set of decisions as well as hardware decisions dealing with the building of new apartment blocks that we want to stimulate the long-term lease and decrease the short-term lease in order to make housing more affordable. So this is also a kind of a degrowth example. And the book that defines the housing policy, written by a dear colleague of mine, architect as well, Iva Marčetić, who is now in Kassel in Germany, doing the research on housing policy, is a theoretical backdrop for our housing policy, and I thank her. I always thank her for her contribution to what the city does in this manner. And the very last slide is a book that I would advise everybody who is not from Zagreb, who is here for the first time and who wants to get a quick overview over some phenomena that built Zagreb, is this book called Project Zagreb. It's a non-linear history about the city. It consists of 17 chapters that address certain topics that authors found most important for Zagreb. It's beautifully drawn. It's very accessible, so it's very readable, it's very understandable. And if you want to have an X-ray vision of Zagreb, I advise you to get this book. That's it from me for the introduction. Thank you all.
Thank you, Luka. Now, has anybody been in Grenoble from the audience here ever in their life? Okay. Eric, just to let you know, around 10 people have been to Grenoble. We have around 60 people, maybe even 70 in the audience. So lots of people are maybe not so acquainted with Grenoble. As I know, you are trying with various kinds of degrowth ideas and to implement them into practice in your city. But that's about it that I know about Grenoble. I've also never been to Grenoble. So could you please introduce us with the city and the ideas and the practices that you're trying to implement?
Yes, so first of all, thank you for this event and for the invitation. Unfortunately, I'm not able to join you physically, but because it's the school first day just tomorrow, and so I had a lot of events here around to prepare this with my team. But it's very important to me to be with you tonight. And as well, I'm very pleased because I supported the new mayor's team during the last municipal election in Zagreb, and so I'm very pleased to see those connections. And I think it's very motivating for us to see those movements everywhere in cities throughout Europe. So I think it's very key that we stay connected. So Grenoble is a city in the French Alps. Actually, it's the largest city of all the Alps, with an urban area of around 700,000 inhabitants, and the city inner wall of 160,000 inhabitants. So at the other side, we have our twin city, Innsbruck, which is slightly lower, but we are the two largest cities in the Alps. And so we are surrounded by mountains And another characteristic for the city, which is 2,000 years old, is so that we are really totally surrounded by the mountains, which is just marvelous. That's why actually that I moved from my birth city in the Pyrenees, in the Basque Country and near the Spanish border, to here 30 years ago. And it's as well a very open city with people coming from everywhere in the world. In the past, for economic reason and rebuilding the city here, but as well, obviously moving away from difficult areas everywhere. Political reason as well, from Chile, from Armenia, from a lot of places. And as well scientific reason, because we are the first center in France for the study, engineering study, and we have the top scientific teams here as well. So politically, as well, as you said, we are working on a new model for the cities. And so we were in 2014, 9 years ago. Grenoble was the first city which was won by the ecologist and citizen team, so the team that I led in 2014. And so I'm from the Green, the French Green Party, and it was the first city. In 2020, there was a lot more large city in France, with Lyon, with Bordeaux, Strasbourg, Besançon, Tours, Poitiers. So a lot of other cities who have now green mayor. So clearly it was a shift in terms of bringing a breakthrough with the liberal model and this growth model, saying that with excellence, with growth, with competition, you will find great things for your inhabitants and great things for the society in general. It was a big turn to us. And the question that we ask ourselves when we think about degrowth is that a concept that should be used? If yes, by who and how we position ourselves with this. What is interesting to me with the term degrowth, which create a lot of debates. So that's very interesting. And the second good point is that you have a large movement at the present time from people being still totally in this techno solutionism world, thinking that technology will solve all our problems, or changing just words and not speaking anymore about growth, but speaking about green growth. And when you speak about green growth, suddenly there is no more problems. And so we have this framework today, which try to slow down the piece of change. We try to empty as much as possible the content of the change that we want to push, and try to reuse for themselves the vocabulary that we use. And even if we play with the word sobriety, for instance, our president, Mr. Macron, now, 1 year ago, start to use sobriety in all of his speeches. And so we see that the terms that we used to use as a political manner are emptied from their content and reused by actually all political competitors. The good point is that with degrowth, clearly they cannot reuse that. You cannot have a degrowth growth. You cannot have so they cannot touch and destroy the concept. So to me, it's very interesting, because as the deputy mayor just said, we see this even the economy of share, the usage and sharing economy is being emptied and reused by capitalism. And the best example of this is the concept of Airbnb. Initially, the purpose is to say how we can share empty space in our flats. So it's a sharing economy, which we could say, wow, great. We don't own anymore. We rent and we use and we optimize and the space. And the result has been exactly the opposite, meaning removing from the sharing economy and the use economy a lot of flats and using those flats as commercial aspects. And now we see in a lot of cities inhabitants that have difficulties to just find a place to live because of this new economy, which is not more at all an economy of share, but is really how to make sure that you speculate the most you can on the land and the flats. So degrowth is, to me, something that is very interesting because it cannot be used by the people we fight with on the future for society. Then maybe a point of question for me is I like this to be used by the research area. I like this to be used by a lot of very engaged citizens in the public debate, but it is the same field as the growth field. Should we grow or should we degrow? But we face the same kind of critique that we can have with the GDP indicator, meaning that the growth by itself, either positive or negative, we still face the same problem. It doesn't count what is positive and what is negative, meaning pollution, car accidents are counted the same as positive things for society. So it merges positive and bad things, and everything seems positive. Obviously, it doesn't take into account a lot of things that are key to world and that cannot be turned into figures and cannot be turned into euro or into dollars. So a lot of things relative to social economy, private economy, friends economy, a lot of things relative to philosophy or imagination. All this is not taken into account. It doesn't connect at all on inequalities. And so you can degrow and have inequalities, or you can grow and have inequalities. So it doesn't say anything of this. And obviously, it doesn't say anything about it's just a flow indicator. And so you don't count at all what are the resources, the state of the resource. And you still feel that resource or natural assets and the beauty of Earth is seen as something that is second, and you can go and degrow. And so those four critiques, to me, are the same for growth and degrowth. And that's why I do prefer in public policy and public debate as political actor, as I said, not for people engaged in research or people engaged in citizen and NGO movement. I prefer to play with it, but to leave it a little bit aside, because what is interesting to me, and particularly at local level, we can change totally what the discussions about all various imagination land, and my purpose is to turn away from this growth thing and say now we need to find prosperity, and we just need to have the condition to live well, pure consumption point of view. We want to fight consumerism. We want to fight inequalities. We want to fight ignorance. And we want then to bring back all human activities into the donuts populated by cage weavers with a social floor and environmental ceiling. And actually, it's a social floor and environmental and social ceiling. there, reducing inequalities and bringing back our community into basic things like guarantee some basic security for all members of community, gather the community around commons, and nurture or desire of sense, so that we can always try to find what we want as human, what we want to do with our time on earth as human, and not be led by fear or by this wrong desire that are pushed to us by the capitalism world. So we play with that. And we do think, and I do think that at local level, public policy can really show that this new world is full of joy. Actually, is better for our expectation as a human being. This imagination land, and we stopped advertising in Grenoble in 2014 when we arrived. We said we don't want any more advertising on public space, and so we stopped the contract that the city had with an advertiser, and so we don't have any more advertising here. We worked on health for people. We work on food and how to have more organic and vegetarian food. So we have now more than 50% vegetarian food at our school meal, for instance. We work on buildings, and we reduce the energy consumption by 40% and green gas emission by 79%. In the last 10 years, and we work on how we move ourselves on the territory. And there we multiplied the number of bike and the bike travels by 3 in the last 10 years, which is good to us. And on top of that, we say, okay, how we can reduce somewhere, rethink our needs so that it better feel our expectations through as well culture, through education, through really pleasure to be together. So how we can reduce our needs, how we can be more efficient to cover those needs, and the last piece obviously is how we turn out from fossil fuel. And so we have a local company that we developed to cover our needs in terms of green electricity, and we cover now for last year, for the first time, we covered the equivalent of the consumption of electricity for all housing in Grenoble by 100% green electricity, meaning which is neither fuel nor nuclear electricity. And so this framework help us, I think, to have inhabitants touching a little bit that is this new model, this donuts model, and this model where we move away from growth is something that is better for them, better for their kids, better for their health, safer for the future. And we have been recognized as well by European Union, because European Union, the European Commission has chosen last year Grenoble as European Green Capital. So it's as well validate the consistency of the framework that we have put in place here in Grenoble. So here some bit maybe around this degrowth thing, which is I think easier to develop at local level than at national level. And so now I spend quite a lot of energy as well to say what kind of imagination landscape we can turn at national level so that we can move as well this framework at national level and not only at the local level. Here it is for the introduction speech.
Thank you, Eric. A couple of times during your talk you had several of these, so people agreed with you. It seems to me that Grenoble can be the capital of degrowth, and then maybe the 11th International Degrowth Conference could be organized in Grenoble. So just to think about it, okay? Thank you, Eric, for this. Thank you for the participation, and hope to see you soon somewhere live. And now we'll start with our long panel list. Vedran will take over now, and he'll also transfer the mic to each and one of you, so you can be seated and enjoy the talk, okay?
Okay, thank you, Branko. Just one more announcement. We are, of course, aware that this is a very big panel. That's not by accident, and we intentionally entered into that risk, but we also wanted to show that we really pay a lot of attention to linking the growing body of research and some practices that exist around Europe in different cities that are very compatible or friendly with degrowth ideas. So we wanted to show that there is some abundance and some new trend that is more engaged and more engaged in linking degrowth with municipalism, but also with urban development. And I hope that you can share with us this risk. I will also we will try to moderate in a way that we also leave enough room for questions. Without further ado, I would now like to invite Claude Pottinger-Glass, who is researcher from Stockholm Environment Institute. I will bring you a microphone if you want to stay there. To show us results of the research and findings, she did an urban just transition, and then we will continue with the rich lineup of speakers. So, Chloe, you are the first one.
Okay, thank you very much. A little bit of pressure to go first. Also, just a disclaimer that I am actually, as Vedran mentioned, my research has been looking at just urban transition. So I'm kind of new to the degrowth scholarship, and also I'm coming to you from Bangkok. So I'm primarily looking at Asian cities. So maybe an interesting person to start the discussion, but I'll do my best. So maybe I want to start by just saying why cities. So we're all here on this panel today to talk about cities, degrowth, transition. And so right now, as has been mentioned, just over half of the world's population live in cities. And by 2050, we know that that's going to grow to 2/3. So I think we have to look at cities really quite simply because it's where the majority of people live. So the decisions that we make on an urban scale will have massive impacts in terms of our carbon emissions. And so in cities, we have this concentration, of people, of ideas, so we can really move things along quickly, and we can share resources more efficiently. But so what my research has looked at is the issue that as cities try to decarbonize, there's been a lack of focus on the justice implications of these shifts. So what's going to happen to communities, to labor markets as we try and move towards zero carbon. And so, as I said, I'm looking at this through the lens of just transition. So that's using a lot of the environmental justice discourse. So distributive justice, how are environmental goods and burdens distributed, procedural, who gets a say in the decisions and how, and then recognitional. So what are the structures and processes that actually led to inequality in the first place? So what I've been doing is I've been talking to stakeholders in cities around the world to try and actually understand what is just urban transition, what does it look like on the ground, and can we move towards some sort of principles and frameworks there. And so to give you a few examples or findings, and so firstly, there's, of course, urban form. So the actual built space of a city and how it can enable or disenable just transition. So urban form is the basis of connectivity of people to services, to jobs, to other people. So how are people getting around? Is it biking? Is it walking? Is it tram? Or is it a long commute in a private vehicle because the city is very spread out? And of course, this has important justice dimensions. You know, if the city's very spread out and people can't afford private transportation, they're not going to be able to access some of the same things, or they're going to have a greater time burden. So for instance, a study in Jordan showed that 47% of women actually turned down job opportunities because they didn't have adequate transportation. And so, as was already mentioned in the beginning, there's this idea now of 15-minute cities, which has become very popular. And I think it's a really exciting idea that can really support this conviviality notion, you know, as well as reducing emissions through having fewer trips needed. We can also build stronger neighborhood relations, a stronger sense of place identity. But I do think there's a risk there, you know. For instance, through gentrification, you know, as an area sort of improves, what could be some of the implications of that? And we were just having a discussion earlier, and my colleague mentioned, you know, 15-minute cities are all well and good if you can get to your favorite local coffee shop. But in order for it to be just, your barista has to also be able to make it there in 15 minutes. And so just to talk a tiny bit more about this idea of gentrification. So we know a lot of cities are trying to implement urban greening as a way to sort of to decarbonize. So, you know, construction of more parks and street trees. But this can also lead to this phenomenon of green gentrification. So people getting priced out of areas because the sort of market value under capitalism has increased. And so this means that a lot of the improvements of this greening, you know, urban cooling, fresher air, a nicer place to exercise and socialize, they're only available for the wealthy. And you know, sometimes this is on purpose. You know, we might think of like gated communities and private parks, but sometimes it's really like an unforeseen consequence of measures to make places more livable. So I think this is maybe a small warning for this sort of 15-minute city discourse. So the point I kind of want to make with that is that climate action planning, urban greening, 15-minute cities, so they have to go hand in hand with social investment, with just housing systems, with rent controls, and making sure that local communities have a say in those changes also. So I'm aware we are very short on time, so I'm just going to give one more example because my research has also really looked into labour markets and how and what sort of labour might look like under just urban transition. And so coming to where I'm based, to Asia, so many cities in the global south and in Asia, they really lack adequate waste management systems. And so this has led to informal systems of waste management being very widespread. So for example, in Thailand, there is approximately 1.5 million informal waste workers who are responsible for approximately 75% of all recycling in the country. Of course, it's very hard to measure because it's in an informal sector. But so in many ways, this sector is the backbone of recycling, which is, you know, very sustainable and important to the city. But the issue is that these jobs are precarious, they're very poorly paid, they're often hazardous, people are working without adequate safety equipment. And so these jobs might be green, but they might not necessarily be just. And so there's been discussions over whether formalization could be a good path. There's been success in some places, not so much success in others. For instance, in Thailand and Vietnam, workers are very, you know, hesitant that formalization might lead to curtailment of their income, of their flexibility. So there's not really one-size-fits-all solution, but I think we have to recognize what's already working really well in cities. How can it be supported? How can we make sure that the informal sector has access to social protections? How can we support them in their collective bargaining? And I think this issue of informality is really key in cities of the global south, and it's relevant to other sectors like energy, transport, housing. So to briefly summarize everything I've talked about, I think that it's really critical to place issues of justice at the heart of our discussions around cities of degrowth. And I hope I've given some illustration of what that can mean. So I think we need to work towards synergy between decarbonisation, decent work and social equity to build better models for our cities. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Lucia Di Paola and I'm here to represent ICLE Europe. ICLE is we also have a global organization, ICLE World Secretariat. We represent local governments all over the world, and I work for the European Secretariat. So local governments are our members, and the city of Zagreb is also one of our members. Well, being here at a academic conference and not being like an expert from an academic perspective on the subject, I thought, what is the perspective that I can bring? And what I know, working with local governments, I'm seeing is how are cities actually seeing degrowth. So this is something that I would like to talk to you about today. So I'm going to be honest with you. In our network, there is not much open and explicit support for degrowth. And here, emphasis on open and explicit is quite important, and I will get back to it later. And people in municipalities, individuals, public servants, elected officials might show interest in the subject in itself, but they lack the larger political support to embrace degrowth or other beyond GDP measures in a holistic way in cities. Why is that? Growth is almost intrinsically part of how cities have been designed, and many still connect degrowth to the idea of recession and economic crisis. Moreover, municipalities are ever more dependent on international investments, such as large urban regeneration projects eating up public space and accelerating gentrification, as Claude was saying. Plus, for the offices of a network of local governments, our organization is non-profit, we also face an issue with funding. Most funders, including the European Commissions, do not still push for a growth narrative, and that means that very pragmatically the growth keeps being pushed out the agenda. However, I want to say something about the fact that implicitly still there is a growing desire to implement beyond growth measures in cities, implicitly. So the ICLE network, with the support of a large number of mayors, in 2020, we signed this Mannheim message, which is like a vision for the future of cities in Europe. And I will quote a few things here that it mentions, and I repeat, this has been signed by a majority of majors in our network. And I quote word by word: values of justice and democracy being more intertwined with sustainability goals, local development beyond growth and competitions, cooperation, solidarity, inclusion, a lifestyle of sufficiency, social economy, safeguarding public income, shifting taxes away from labor, more services and less products, guaranteed living income. So this overall shows that there is a big wish from cities to move away from neoliberalism, market logics, and even if degrowth is not explicitly mentioned, and even if signatories are not yet implementing all these measures, we see that there is this growing desire, which I believe is what is most important. And beyond desires, we are seeing that local governments are actually taking a growing number of bold initiatives, and which challenge neoliberal growth, and that we could say are therefore degrowth in spirit, and that again here are implicitly degrowth. So a few just two examples: the Berlin rent cap from 2020. The attempt was to stop increasing property speculation, and surely was pushed by housing movements, but at the end of the day it was supported by the left-wing parties in the local government. So it was the local government actually implementing the measure. The law was unfortunately shot down in court, but the point here again is not always about the success, it's about the desires cities have to do more. Another examples that I like quite a lot is a local government in the Netherlands, Haarlem, west of Amsterdam. From 2024, they will ban all advertising for holidays, flights, fossil fuels, non-electric cars, and meat as a part of measure to tackle climate change. And this is again also taken by the local government. Another important example of degrowth is municipalization. The fearless movement, fearless cities movements from municipalities. Here it's what I'm talking about. A research published by the Transnational Institutes plus other organizations showed that there have been at least 835 examples of municipalization or remunicipalization of public services. If for those who don't know, here it means moving services from the private sector back to the public sector. So there have been 835 examples since 2000 involving more than 1,000 municipalities in 45 countries. The sectors affected here are water, waste, energy, transport, education, healthcare, social work, and several other local government services such as constructions, cultural events, sports, school gathering, housing, green spaces, building, cleaning, and way more. And French cities here are actually seem to be some of the front runner in Europe, and Grenoble, as Pio was mentioning, is also like really good example. So my conclusion, although there is a lack of explicitly political support for degrowth in cities, there is actually endless examples of how municipalities are implicitly adopting degrowth and other beyond GDP measures and approaches. And the desire to do so is definitely there. I think for a network of cities like ours, what we can really benefit from the degrowth community is to keep doing, is to keep having and to keep building a base of knowledge and evidence that these examples, that these actual bold initiatives that cities, the local governments are implementing, they actually work. And of course, to do so, it's also important that public and philanthropic funding allow for this explicit language to be used. Thank you.
Yes. Hello. Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's great to be on this very abundant panel, and I think a lot of our recent research findings really chime with what Lucia said, so it's a good starting off point. So I'm Imogen. I work at LSE Cities, the European Cities Programme, which is a kind of research and engagement programme focusing on the future of European cities at the London School of Economics and Political Science. So a few months ago, I was speaking to Susan Aitken, the leader of Glasgow City Council, about her vision for the city. We discussed how in the wake of the pandemic and the 2008 financial crash, urban policymakers in Europe are finding a little bit more space to ask critical questions of the economy. So a little bit like picking up on these patterns that Lucia was saying. People are asking, what is growth-driven urban development actually generating? Who is actually benefiting? Could it be that there are alternative economic paths out there that would allow them to meet the needs of their citizens within the ecological limits of the planet? So what we're seeing is a kind of maze of strategies and frameworks and toolkits in the kind of urban policy circuits coming up in response to this. And I wanted to ask this council leader in Glasgow how she was navigating this maze of ideas about what cities would look like in a post-growth era. Would Glasgow declare itself a donut city like Amsterdam or Brussels, building a new set of indicators to map its local and global economic impacts? Or maybe it would commit to community wealth building, working in neighborhoods to localize economic activity rather than outsourcing services to profit-driven multinationals. Or perhaps something like the framework of foundational economy, which some of you might be familiar with, could be appealing. That kind of emphasizes essential sectors that need to be invested in, like housing, transport, care, renewable energy, whilst degrowing actively sectors that harm people and the planet. So I guess it's probably a familiar list to lots of you in this room of kind of financial services, fossil fuels, advertising. And I had a very long list of detailed questions of comparing these different visions and approaches and asking how Susan would navigate them. And I'd like to just quote what she said back to me, because I think it kind of conveys something of the distance between the academic degrowth debates that we're having here and the practical task facing cities in a post-growth era. So she said, "I'm very wary that there's always something new coming along. We were talking about inclusive growth, and then everybody started talking about community wealth building, and everybody started talking about the well-being economy, and everybody started talking about the donut approach. All these things are tools that we can use, but it's the end goal that matters. It's high quality, well-paid, sustainable jobs that all our population have access to. It is a sustainable city where everyone can live a carbon-free lifestyle as much as possible and continuing to reduce inequalities. These are the things that we want to achieve. These are the things that citizens understand." So I found that this kind of end goal of urban post-growth really resonated with government representatives that we spoke to in cities across Europe. The question is how to get there. So, I mean, we've already heard a lot of fantastic examples of what it looks like on the ground, so I won't dwell too long on that. And I'm sure many people in this room are absolutely more expert than me on how you can translate post-growth into urban space. But one thing is clear, and I think worth picking up on from what Lucia said, is that no city we found in Europe was willing to actually associate themselves publicly with the term post-growth, let alone degrowth. So whilst there was some implicit kind of certainly playing with the idea in the way that I guess Eric was talking about, even in cities like Amsterdam or Brussels, where terms like donut and well-being economy are being used, they're being used quite cautiously and not necessarily in direct communication with the public. So this is an uncomfortable reality, but I think it's something that as degrowth scholars and activists we need to really think about how we move forward on that. Instead, what we're seeing is a kind of patchwork of small-scale, short-term post-growth pilots cropping up in cities across Europe. So it can be in energy, transport, housing, food, a lot of things that Lucia just spoke about, which are kind of related, I suppose, explicitly or implicitly to a number of different economic agendas for transition. And of course, there's something to celebrate in the fact that these experiments are taking place on the ground. But I think both within and outside of city government, people are very aware that delivering post-growth cities and the kind of end goal that Susan Aitken talks about is going to take a little bit more of a long-term systemic shift in urban politics. And the task is daunting. I mean, European cities are steeped in growthism. Amsterdam remains the world's largest gasoline port, as well as being a donut city. Barcelona is considering airport expansion while pursuing policies to curb over-tourism. And I don't have to tell you that housing financialization, job insecurity, air pollution is all rife across European cities, and city governments in Europe have a long way to go in terms of recognizing their moral and historical responsibilities to dismantle the model of extractive economic growth that they've exported around the world. I do find it encouraging, though, if I can try to end on a hopeful note, that politicians and policymakers that we spoke to earlier this year are really recognizing the need to build a coherent political narrative around post-growth and make visible the fact that all of these pilots and experiments are part of a kind of more systematic transformation that's taking place in cities. The question is how to articulate that and kind of bring, I suppose, the public on board with how that can be, and actually make sure that this vision is collectively shaped by city governments and citizens who are ready to kind of work together, not just to support small, isolated, exciting post-growth experiments in cities, but also to challenge the harmful engines of economic growth that stand in their way.
Hi, My name is Anna. I am architect and urban planner. I am also a researcher at the University of Sheffield. But I have been involved with urban social movements and specifically with the municipalist movement in Spain. I was part of the government in Madrid. I have been following what has been happening in Barcelona and in other cities. And I am the coordinator, one of the coordinators of the European Municipalist Network that was born out of the experience of the fearless cities. So what I am trying to talk about now is how, from the experience of municipalism movement and of municipalist policies, how can we see this interaction with the degrowth and in general with the climate crisis and the climate emergency. And it's true, as Chloe said, that, so Imogen said, that this is not explicit. I mean, even in municipalist governments that are, I think, explicitly calling for another kind of production, for another kind of reproduction, and for another kind of how we build in the cities, the issues related with climate emergency hasn't been at the core. It has been a lot of climate mitigation, climate crisis mitigation, but not climate crisis like the causes, right? I also have to point out that actually the City Council of Barcelona, when Barcelona en Comú was in the government, opposed the new run of the airport, and it's only the new socialist government that is introducing it as part of the agenda, just, you know, for the sake of accountability. So thinking about this issue, why I'm here today, apart from the kind invitation of the organizers, is because 2 years ago, Julia Steinberger tweeted about the Living Well Within Limits project that she was doing at the Leeds University. And she was saying something that really hit home. And she said that the findings were so interesting that she was going to turn her research into democratizing provisioning systems. And then I thought, well, this is actually what we are doing. This is precisely at the core of what a democratic municipalism, which is infused with the idea of the commons, is doing. And to me, it was very clarifying, this idea that it doesn't matter how much we are going to arrange the biophysical inputs. I mean, how many carbon neutral houses are we going to have in the future? That we are not going to get in a better place in these limited resources if there is not a democratic provision of systems. And I think that municipalism is at the forefront of these kind of experiments. And the other thing, and why I think democratic also is interesting, is because it might be that, degrowth is here. As William Gibson will say, it's just not evenly distributed. So maybe one of the strategies is to democratize degrowth, right? So degrowth is happening, we heard it, people are not able to buy, so consumerism, is going down, they won't be able to travel, they don't have access to energy, but this has to be democratized in these things. So my other point, also in relation with municipalism and a lot of the things that are being here, is this think of the local scale as a place of limitations and a place of need. And I have to say that from our political tradition in Spain, municipalism has been a confederal project since the 19th century. There is not a sense in the municipalist movement that I inhabit that these are partial experiments that want to affect only our cities. This is, first of all, a prefigurative politics. That means we are prefiguring what can be done in a higher scale, and it is along a vector of transformation that goes beyond degrowth, that actually attacks the center of the question of how we organize ourselves in this world. And these are not only putting in question the role of the market, and the role of capitalism, but also, I'm sorry to say, putting in question the role of the state and the kind of decisions that, top-down visions from the state are applying to the cities. So, again, in the case of Spain, there is a lot of examples of networks that have organized against the debt, against the austerity, the remunicipalization of water. Pablo Sanchez and people from Catalonia can tell more about it, has been effective because of a network and because of exchange and knowledge and peer support. So sanctuary cities as well. There are a number of examples that show that the cities have a potential of having an effect on national and transnational level, because also I think that cities, and here again from the municipalist experience, is crossed by the feminist realization that we are interdependent. Nations, to a certain degree, they can actually pretend that they are, they're autonomous on their decisions, that they have the territory, the taxes and the, the monopoly of the violence and so on and so forth. But basically, cities come from this realization that you depend on the territories in such a degree that you are interdependent. So, to me, a radical democratic interdependence is probably the space where degrowth and municipalism can actually merge and find each other. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Liz Richardson. I work at the University of Manchester, and my question is, I was thinking about why do some ideas take off and some fail? We've got lots of counter-hegemonic ideas that we've all been engaged with over the years. Some of my ideas are very hegemonic, and even those have been unsuccessful in my attempts to get people to take them on. I'm trying to think about what the conditions are for things to be successful. We know that ideas are very powerful resources in their own right, and they're generative resources for actors to use. So they're very powerful. At the same time, ideas are very fragile, and they're also, I would argue, insufficient to create change by themselves. So what I'd like to argue for is the crucial role of active institution building, otherwise known as getting your hands dirty. And this is something where I think some of the debates that have happened in the academic world have really shied away from this idea of getting one's hands dirty in terms of active institution building. And I argue that because institutions, because we want to work collectively and because we want to shape the ways that we organise society, and because institutions serve as a way to organise our hopes, dreams and fears, therefore institution building is the thing that will give ideas traction. Institutions aren't just ideas. I mean, obviously here, intellectual debate, this is our love language, isn't it? But we also have to pay attention to the other really crucial aspects that make up institutions. And that includes emotion. Not just emotion around the topic of degrowth, but emotion around your own constituents, your electoral base, your internal position, your prospects of promotion as a bureaucrat, all of the things that make up us as complex human beings with human frailties and needs and desires. The other things that we should pay attention to are rules and practices, whether those are formal or informal rules, and the practices that happen in institutions, those are so crucial. Everyone knows it's how things happen round here. What are our ways of doing things? And really paying attention. Some of my recent work with the City Regional Authority back at home in Greater Manchester has been to surface and articulate on behalf of the actors in the institution and change in the informal rules towards greater democratisation and citizen participation, that they asked us to come in and said, we think we're doing things differently. Could you write down what you think we're doing differently? And then show these artefacts, these objects, produce them into an object and show them to other people, and somehow that makes tacit knowledge of the actors who are on board visible to a wider set of actors and helps to promote that case. So these strategies are really crucial, other than having just the ideas in the ether and hoping somehow that there will be a mayor who takes them on. What kind of institutions do I mean? Well, we've already heard many sessions, panels, the conference where people have been using the very powerful strategy of enacting alternatives in their own practices at hyper-local scale, sometimes with trans-local initiatives. Great, brilliant, let's keep doing that. But I am here to make the case for a complementary role of active institution building at the municipal level. There are a lot of reasons why not, and not all of my activist colleagues think this is a great plan because of all the problems we know about: misappropriation of ideas, the tedium of policy fads and fashions. You're in favour one week, you're being passed over for the next exciting idea the next week. Path dependencies make it really hard to create change. Understandably, some people say, Liz, I'm just not going to bother. I cannot be asked. I'm going to do my thing on my scale. The reason I would say, fine, you do that, but someone else has to translate it to the municipal level is, yes, there's resources, yes, there's potential impacts at scale, but the thing that we really need is to scale out, not scale up, in a polycentric way, and the municipal level helps provide a safety net so that those disparities, those inevitable inequities in people's capacity to enact these alternatives, there's a safeguard to prevent greater disparities and greater inequalities in people's capacity being exacerbated. So that would be why I would argue that we should definitely all go and sit in lots and lots of very tedious meetings with local councils and really learn to love that.
Yes, thank you for having me as well. Well, I also will be very honest with you. We are not talking about degrowth in Budapest in the city hall. But there are two reasons for that. One is that our income, what we use to develop and maintain running the city, is based on the tax we are getting from the local businesses, and I guess the mayor would love to see that they are growing rather than degrowing. At the moment when we are not having any money whatsoever, we are net payers to the Hungarian budget. This is one thing. The other thing is that I would be very happy if all my colleagues in the City Hall would understand climate measures, first of all, and then we can go on and continue on that road. I had this funny idea hearing the others here that just transition is a very nice thing. And we should set up a fund for city administrators to slowly transit out of the city halls, because otherwise it's going to last very long, that the cities are going to be sustainably changed to something which is a good direction, really. It's if you compare the people who are working on climate issues or environment or anything what relates to something what we are talking about here, my department consists of 35 people, and there are almost 1,000 people in the city hall trying to block us to do anything, which is very disturbing for them, because it is a different thing and we are doing totally outside the box things and projects for them. And people don't like change, especially civil servants don't like change. And I know that in Stockholm, Malmö, or in probably Amsterdam, this is a different thing in the city hall. But in Central Eastern Europe, where the Prussian style of offices are working, it is a very big problem, and we feel really stuck in some days with this. And I won't go into details of what sort of projects we are doing, obviously energy efficiency, mobility, shared economy, and all these things, which are marvelous and would be nice to, if you come again to Budapest and check it out. But I wanted to touch on one thing which was mentioned already, is democracy and legitimacy. And I think mayors, even though I was very critical about city halls in my previous last couple of minutes, mayors have much higher legitimacy, especially in Central Europe, than governments. There are more people coming to vote for local leaders, and the majority is much higher when they get voted into their position. So I think it's an issue, and therefore we are lobbying also for EU funding to be redirected much more direct to the cities, because the risk of corruption on local level is much lower than from the state distribution. So this is one issue to consider, and probably it's an important message when we consider cohesion money, European taxpayers' money, disappearing in these miraculous ways in Central Europe. That would be a better use of that funding for real development, climate-related and climate-sound development, rather than building non-existent objects in Central Eastern Europe. Thank you.
Okay, everybody still awake? Great. So therefore, I'm going to talk a little story about the city of Ghent in Belgium, which is of course part of the European Union, and it has two levels. First, I'm going to tell you a bright story, and then it gets a little bit dark. So, but that's to stay awake. So first, and just it's also a bit my personal story. I've been member in the past for 20 years of the city council, working hard to change the city. And I think, yes, at several levels or several perspectives, you can look at things that are changing in Ghent from a degrowth perspective. There has been introduced a really bold mobility plan, meaning that now in a few years' time, a lot more people are cycling, are walking, and there are really less cars. Parking lots have been replaced by parks, playgrounds for children, so real nice. We also have a quite good local food policy, which means we are reconnecting local farmers with inhabitants. We are making sure that children at school can get a decent warm meal with organic food. And also, if you look at housing, there's a good housing policy, investing in more affordable and low energy housing. So in certain domains, you could say the transition is going in the right direction. We have a very good climate policy plan, but at the same time, to be very honest, when I walk through my city, when I cycle through my city, it's full of tourists that came by plane. When I go to the central historical center, It's full of people, tourists, eating all day long junk food and pushing out local restaurants. And you see a lot of apartments which are now used for Airbnb. So that reduces the amount of houses available for living, reducing houses to live into, spaces to rent out. And so for me, these are two realities happening at the same time. And this, I think, is crucial to grasp and to make it conceptually. I think there are two concepts of Manuel Castells. It's working for a place to live, for human encounters. You try to do that at a locality that at the same time is a space for the capitalist flows of products and consumers and capital. And so I think that if we really want degrowth cities, we need another frame. And I'm talking as from a city as member of the European Union. We need another European project. As long as the European Union is defined as a territory for competition, for just space for corporations, it will be very hard to really go 100% for degrowth cities. And I think therefore we have to really connect different battles. To me personally, I moved from being active in the local politics to Extinction Rebellion, fighting government projects, so very fun. But so we really need kind of multi-scholar movements and kind of democratic regulation at different levels. For instance, in my country, the cities have no power to regulate Airbnb. So it's very hard. It's a kind of everyday fight you can't win. So, and that's really, I think, important. So cities really play a big role, but we will only win the fight if we connect it to fights at different levels. Therefore, but the narrative is very important. This session started with a long definition of what is degrowth. I find the shorter definition the best. It's the decolonizing of our political imagination. How do we imagine cities? And what I find very interesting is the change in city marketing. Cities used to promote themselves as a place to go to consume and so on. And I really find now the city marketing of Amsterdam fantastic. They make videos with a message, don't come to Amsterdam, stay grounded. They mostly promote it in the UK. I don't know why, but that's another point. And so, just to finish, we need this kind of new political imagination that everywhere we can go from Airbnb to Fairbnb, we go from Ryanair to night trains, and we go to McDonald's to local food hubs. And I think this could be our political narrative on the European level and on the local level. Thank you.
So, hello, I'm Cleo, living in Berlin, and I'm activist, citizen. So I'm going to propose a kind of very concrete idea of a new institution, a degrowth institution. Let's go toward transformation center for all. Yeah, so because if we imagine a post-fossil lifestyle, then we come up with very new activities for all of us. We can't be pure academics anymore or pure business people anymore, but because we have to do the stuff locally, we were outsourcing globally for the too many times, which was the reason of destruction mainly. So we have to bring back our activities within the local space. And for that, we have to learn how to make it, because we have unlearned. Through capitalism, we have unlearned a lot of very practical skills, we will need for a post-fossil lifestyle. So we need a space where to learn it. And unlearning capitalism has a lot to do with getting our hands dirty and to act in common. In a post-fossil city, we are all contributing, whether in the kitchen for all in our street, in the repair or lending shop in our block, in the big community garden in our quartier that provides serious amounts of vegetable and fruits. We are caring for each other, and we lend a hand with the construction of rainwater cisterns, the maintenance of the common laundry room, and etc. So, yeah, you see, we have a lot to learn. And so we have to create this. I want to watch you, but I can't with my glasses, so I have to. A transformation center for all is a place where we gather, where we learn from each other, and where we invite the pioneers of a society to teach us how to go on in a post-fossil lifestyle. Because we have in niche of society a lot of expertise already, which is not so much acknowledged because it doesn't suit in the capitalist, corset we live in. But in community gardens, they are expert for permaculture. In universities, there are a lot of people prototyping solutions for very specific problems we have in cities and in urban situations. Also in regional, tinier cities, whether it's a village or a metropole, we have to change a lot in our daily life. So it affects also labor and the world of labor. So I assume in the future, for having a sustainable future, we will need way more repairers and gardeners than soldiers. So how to get there? Yeah, we can imagine a plan, yeah? And the plan has a few steps. I won't go in details within the steps, because, that would take too long. So first, scout. Scout for a building in your city which is empty and which is not suitable for housing. For example, in Germany, in the coming year, 50 shopping malls are gonna be empty because people have changed their consumption habits. So these shopping malls, they're really in the center of the cities, and for housing, they're really difficult to use because not much daily light is coming in. So we can use them for our common purpose as a transformation center for all, where we learn what we need to learn. Then you plan with co-creation, you invite people to come, and then you build up an alliance within your region, within your city, with the stakeholder that can support and contribute to the project. So you try to engage universities, educational centers, but also, citizens who have gained a lot of experience in organizing neighborhood, but also maybe known artists, because you need a lot of political power to go forward this kind of innovation. Then, I have to look. So you campaign, you lobby, you build your alliance, and then you get finally this building, and you start negotiating. If you have a positive city like Zagreb, maybe you go for a common public partnership. You may know all public-private partnership, which is the main move our governments are doing all the time, like outsourcing activities for the common good. This is another direction, like common, so we come together as a force and with a same goal, and to make a contract with the public about how ruling this kind of space. But if you are like us in Berlin, we tried to start that, and we had a red-green government, so we were on a very good path, like negotiating the amount of budget for a pilot project for half a year, and it was really nice and exciting. And then we had a change of mayor. So, and the whole project is not is now killed because the council, House of Council, is not interested at all in this kind of project. So maybe that would be a moment for example, to address also private money givers, business. I think there are a lot of people who own a lot of money who have very bad conscience and maybe be okay to start experimenting with their money. So be open. And yeah, so, but the best would be, of course, expropriating and socializing the building we need. Yeah. And just to finish, I give you a bunch of arguments for why such transformation center for all is so important and we need to create this new kind of space. Is first, we translate in this space scientifically funded goals and demands into lived and livable reality. We help people to get away from consumption, unlearning consumption, find state in this kind of space. So we contribute to this huge cultural shift towards, unlearning consumption. Then we train and enable interested people to make them fit for rapid decarbonization and adaptation. We create transformative and thus future-proof jobs, regional jobs. And the more we solve locally, the less we harm globally. And I have to add here, the local approach doesn't exempt us as citizens from this planet to address the bigger picture, the global homework we have all to do, like asking, demanding, and raising our voice for the global south, for cancelling the debt, and for reparational relations, building up reparational relations to nature and to people. The last two arguments is, the very last one. This establishment of this kind of space, of such solidarity structure, acts as a local protection wall against further deprivation of people. For example, energy, repair, or fresh food, we can really organize in the city because we have the skills to go forward. And also, with this solidar culture we set up, it's a very proper wall against fascist tendencies, because we learn commoning, and people who do commoning can't get fascist on the same way. I don't know how it works out, but I assume it will be for help in that kind. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm the last one, right? So, yeah, bear with me. Lot of points to build on for me, so that's good. I can just refer back to things that have already been said. But I'm Sophie Bloemen. I work with Commons Network. We are a think tank and collaboratory for social ecological transition, and we work to explore new models for economy, working on different levels. And we have been quite active in Amsterdam for the last year, so I've been asked to come and talk about the experiences in Amsterdam and to what extent Amsterdam could be a post-growth oriented city. For Amsterdam, there's always, and it was already referred to, there's always talk and there's action. So if you might have followed the news a bit about Amsterdam in the last years, you might believe that we are a donut city. We're actually, we've embraced the donut. We're following Kate Raworth's book, and we are now entering into post-capitalist society. Actually, what we've done is to increase recycling. So, there's a lot of talk. There's not so much walk, and of course we already have the bicycles, and we have a lot of things already going for us in terms of quality of life, which for some cities still seem like something they really want to reach. So I'm very aware of that as well. But for me, I will take a little bit more of a cynical perspective, I'm afraid. So because this communications agency that was already referred to, funnily enough, of the Amsterdam is very good, and it managed actually to get enormous amounts of tourists into Amsterdam that are now blocking everything, right? And have totally changed the economy of the city. Now they're doing, I didn't even know about these movies about stopping to come, that's great. And what they've also done, this communications agency, has also been able to get all these foreign investors to invest into our housing market very actively. So we have, Amsterdam is really a city that's, is heavily consumption and growth oriented. We have heavily invested in the financial district. We have Uber's, what's it called, main office, main headquarters now, or the headquarters. We have them. It's great. That being said, there have been some interesting steps being taken in Amsterdam, and we do see a shift in attitude. Not this oblivious pursuit of growth and consumption anymore, and the belief that everything will trickle down, everything will be wonderful. And there's, of course, this is due to some shocks that we've had. We've had COVID, where we've seen everybody has seen, and also, we have seen what is really important. And also there has been, of course, came along with a lot of deprivation for many people. We have a huge housing crisis, so there have been housing protests as well. And there is a pushback against gentrification and people being pushed out of their neighborhoods. So this shift, this realization, you can see, for example, there's been a publication of an environment vision for 20 years. It's quite an important vision where one of the 5 priorities is to grow within limits. So what that exactly, how that works out, but at least we're aware of these limits. Another policy that we've seen very recently is the intention to shrink Schiphol, our airport, which is really unprecedented. I mean, we were still like I think 2 years ago, it was still unthinkable that we wouldn't let go of this expansion. And now we are like, it's too much, we're gonna shrink it. And there has been more and more attention for the local economy. So this is a little bit meta, and I'd like to zoom in a little bit and speak really also from my experience, as we've been involved in city politics. So we have a coalition of Labour, Greens, and Liberals in Amsterdam. And this has been like that for also the last coalition. Now Labour is the strongest, and before that it was more the Greens and Liberals had the social liberals, they had the economic portfolio. So in this first coalition, when the Greens were actually the most, I don't know how it worked out, because they didn't have the economic portfolio, but they were the biggest, so they didn't really negotiate that very well. But they wanted to be a fearless city, like Anna already referred to. They they looked at Barcelona and other cities in Spain, and they thought that's cool. We want to be that too. We also want the municipalist policies, and there was a green alderman who really believed in this, really pushed it. Some people around him. So we were going to be a fearless city, and everybody signed it. Little did they know, in the coalition, what that exactly meant. But it did give some space for exploring some of these policies and what would that mean. So this municipalist approach that luckily I don't have to. I think Anna already explained it very well. So there was a think tank under the Department of Democratization and Social Affairs on municipalism, and we were kind of part of that. We took part in that and helped out, and we thought about what could be these local policies and these things we can do to support. Let's call it, this both growth, a city or commons-based. So what we really focused on then was supporting practices that gave form to this other economy. So this democratization of provision, if you will. And we focused on this support for local economic practices that would result in regenerative economies that are democratic and that would keep value in the neighborhood. And there were some policies already in line with that, like there was support for housing cooperatives. There was, to have more cooperatives provide in housing. Not enough, isn't been so substantial. There was support for energy cooperatives, And there was a lot of attention for co-creation as the definition of democratization. So a lot of consultations, a lot of talking, to the extent that at some point, some of the local community groups did a participation strike. They didn't want to participate anymore because it just took their time. They weren't reimbursed for their hours because, of course, they were just only like neighborhood people, or they weren't experts. So, and nothing in the end was done with their insights because it was like, yeah, we just do some consultation rounds. That's democratization, which is now, so this era of this is over now, of this kind of talking. I mean, of course, it's all good intention, but it was very without substance in the end. And so there was a lot of talk, and there was quite little financial support, and some of this really got stuck also in the Department of Democratization or Spatial Development. While maybe, we thought it would be really important to get, the economic department on board if you really want to, change the economy. So I want to highlight two processes that came out of those efforts within the municipality, political entanglements, discussions, but also outside within civil society. So one example, which is really funny, is, well, you call it Transformation Center. We spent quite a lot of time pushing for this idea of an incubator for the community economy, which has a lot of elements that you refer to. It's really about unlearning, but also supporting this economy that we want to see. If we want to see this thriving societies, these regenerative practices, if we want to support these commons initiatives and these co-ops that are not extractive, that are democratic, we have to, the institutions, the government needs to support them actively. It's not just going to happen. I mean, we have 100. I think this is literal. Like, I think we have 100 startup programs or incubator programs for startups that we then hope will be bought up by VC, and then we're successful. So this talk and this action is so far apart. So we thought, well, okay, if we're donut city, let's have an incubator program for the donut economy, or for the community economy. And this is now kind of happening. There's a coalition of groups that has, united. It's been proposed as a public collective partnership or public commons partnership, so that the municipality, local government will take a role in it. The municipality has now taken this up. It's working on this, and it seems like now finally also the alderman of economy is going to be on board to support this and his department and put money there and create institutional capacity to do this. So we don't have a building yet, but maybe we don't. There's lots of buildings across town. It can be decentralized. So that's something that's hopeful and that's moving very slowly. And then the other thing is community wealth building, which is also came out of this. Out of this kind of process, initiating with this municipalism vision, and community wealth building has already been said, but it's important because it's structural. It's also about really moving financial flows, moving assets to communities. And I have a definition here which is very clear. So it's an economic development model that transforms local economies based on communities having direct ownership and control of their assets. So it's about using anchor institute. Like an example would be, because it's still kind of meta, right? So an example would be, for example, you use a semi-public institution like a hospital as an anchor institute to support local economy. For example, the catering for the food. The catering for the food, you could make the hospital could make sure that this is provided for by a local cooperative, but the value stays in the community. So this community wealth building has now been, so we have lobbied, advocacy, and there's all this stuff happened, and it was also from inside the municipality, of course. So it's now found its place in the 3 big master plans for the 3 neighborhoods, Southeast, North, New West, which are quite big, which are poor, where there's a lot of work to be done. There's 20-year master plans, a lot of government money, central government money coming there. And now, of course, it has to be implemented. That's the next step. But that's, and we're going to be able, we hope to be able to support in that. So those are two examples of which really relate to what was said earlier as well, which really support this democratic local provisioning, which we also think is crucial to really transform to another economy. Thank you.
Thank you all for your contributions, very valuable contributions. As you see, there is abundance of knowledge, of research, of experience. We could have a two-day conference only on cities in post-growth era. I know that also, thank you all for being with us. I know that it's late, it's a long day, but still we would like to invite you for 2 or 3 questions for one round. If you have any, please come, please raise hand. No, it's too late. Can you please come here? Sorry.
Hi, I'm Patrice. I'm going to say something because nobody wants to ask a question. So I would like to say, I have a comment on what Chloe was saying. She was, no, you. No, the other. You, yeah. It's Cleo, I'm sorry, I said Chloe, but I mean Cleo. You basically were reinventing the squatters movement. And the squatters movement has been smashed by forces of local government and national government, also in Berlin. So we have to start all over again. And it's not a critique, it's not kind of, but it's a bit sad. When I listen to you, I think, yes, but we had all that before. And one of the things of the squatters movement was that you were learning a lot of, I would almost say, survival skills, which are absolutely essential if you want to degrowth. I mean, and well, that's what I want to say, that's all.
More? Okay.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I don't know if mine is a question, but maybe it's just something to say, and if you would like to answer somehow. Like, I listened very carefully to all of your speech, and was asking to myself, like, it's kind of easy to talk about a city because it's really punctual, like location, but what about if we talk about the growth in suburbs or like in a spread area? I don't think that it would be this easier, but a lot of people also live in suburbs, and as well some people still live in the internal areas, and it would be interesting to like not apply the growth concept into cities, but also into a wider region. I don't know, it's just a point of view. Take you. If
anybody wants to reply to that? We have one more, so maybe you can take some time to think about it. Please.
Sorry, don't want to take much time, but first of all, thank you so much for this very realistic approach. I think it's needed here. And the question is, do you think that not using the term degrowth, but trying to use the term circularity would make things easier, or is it more or less the same no-go for the cities when it comes to implementing the policies we're all talking about here? Thank you.
Let's collect.
Thank you for a wonderful panel. My question's very short. What do you see as the role of activism in this transition to the transformed societies and cities we're hoping for?
It's very short. No change without activism. No, it sounds funny, but just look at the history of the welfare state in Europe. It's only because of consistent social struggle of labor and feminist movement for decades that there was transformative social change. It won't be different this time.
For the suburbs, I think they have to move into the cities, and then we can deal with them. Don't travel that much.
You want to sit here?
No, I wanted to say, like, as an urban planner, from urban planning point of view, suburbs didn't make any sense from the beginning. So basically, there is a reason why societies got into cities, and there is a reason why density brings a certain kind of advantages in general. But in particular, suburban areas are, by definition, unsustainable. Like from the beginning, it was made possible by cars and based in car consumption. So it's really not a place where this could play. So better move to the city.
Thank you.
That was like the.
In contrary, for my position, the suburbs are very interesting space, and suburbs are reproducing, the colonial structure we have in our cities. In the suburbs, the most deprived people live normally, and they are not very attractive. They have less infrastructure, and people who are not earning a lot of money are living there mostly. So I think they would gain maybe the most, is the part of the population which is maybe potentially gaining the most of change and of self-organization and of putting of quartier transformation center or other infrastructure we can imagine. I think it's very, and also there is a place, is this also the space where people stop going to elections. Also, they don't, because they don't feel represented by anybody. So I see it as a potential.
Just a quick reaction about circularity. I think Piol actually had this point at the beginning. There is a risk to just co-opt everything into growth language. So circular growth, growth circularity. Like, I just like my point earlier about language, implicit and explicit, is that I think cities, local governments are staying away from degrowth because it's explicitly normative, and so I believe that it's important to have language that is explicit and that cannot be easily co-opted or gain another meaning. Yeah.
Maybe if I can add just, we were listening to all of you, Luca and I here, and then we were like, wow, this kind of politics or policy or idea we are trying to push in Zagreb, and these kind of things we try to push and so on. But it seems to me that there is, that all the cities are torn somewhere between the growth paradigm and the degrowth paradigm. I think that lots of people live their lives in the cities. When I think about Zagreb, that's at least from the point of view of Zagreb, there is lots of practices that could be labeled as degrowth, but they're just not being labeled as degrowth. People don't know that degrowth is something to be put on the activities that they're doing. And I think that our role as local municipal maybe government is to spread the narrative and to think about those punctual things that are happening in the city. And when you were mentioning transformative center, I think we need a transformative office within the city which will combine and collect all of those things happening and say, okay, this is the practices that this city wants to have spread it all around the city, including the suburban areas also. So, yeah.
So the evening is young. Once again, thank you all, and of course, again, many thanks to Luka, who had time to join us on behalf of City of Zagreb as the deputy mayor. Of course, thanks also to Eric Piol, but we will pass that via further correspondence. Yeah, sorry.
We have to eat, please.
You can maybe pose it directly to person. Sorry. Thank you.